Hello again, everybody. This is John with BestPriceNutrition.com. Today we have Bruce with us from Garden of Life, and we're not shooting this video on the Shire. It's just Bruce is 6'5". I'm actually not short, so just want to get that out there because I know those comments will come. Didn't know you were short, blah, blah, blah. But anyways, we do videos with Bruce because Bruce is really knowledgeable, and we like to have Bruce as opposed to other reps. We've done that in the past because Bruce is objective and he's very knowledgeable, so it's a really good opportunity when we do have him here. He's not a shameless promoter of products. He actually knows what he's talking about, so that's why we actually have him in these vids. So today we're going to talk to you guys about coconut oil, and you'll notice it's actually a liquid right now, and we did that on purpose because we put it outside. It's a little warm here right now. It's the summertime, because we wanted to show people that at temperatures around 80 degrees, coconut oil actually becomes a liquid. But if you store it in your house, you're going to notice it's a solid. And we were talking off camera about the dogma that if something's a solid at room temperature, you shouldn't eat it, like butter, based on some stupidity that somehow that's going to be what it turns into in your arteries, which is really just nonsense. Obviously your body temperature is much higher than room temperature. 98.6 is a lot higher than 72 if we're going to say that's room temperature. So that silliness and the whole lipid hypothesis has been pretty much debunked. So Bruce, what is coconut oil?
Right. So basically it's the oil that it's actually, I've read that it is the most commonly consumed oil throughout human history. If you think about how many humans lived around equatorial climates, it's an oil they get from crushing the coconut and extracting from the flesh, and you get all the milk and the coconut water out, and you're left with the oil. And the oil is full of saturated fats and monounsaturated fats. It's full of all these fatty acids, but particularly there's a lot of really interesting science coming out about what we call medium chain triglycerides. And these are like carbon chains with very specific lengths. And that's what everyone's looking at. They're looking at lauric acid, caprylic acid. There's tons of new stuff coming out about how it fights infection, how it fuels nerve cells, how it can actually help repair nerves. I was reading the Department of Defense is actually doing research for Iraq veterans and Afghanistan veterans, guys who have had nerve damage from explosives or things. Really, ketones that you get from these fatty acids can really fuel the nerves and be awesome for regeneration.
That's interesting, yeah. So the whole depression thing too, I think, comes up a lot because obviously we get guys come back from overseas, and sometimes with depression and things like that, it's not the most empirical science sometimes, because it's not like we could just flash a brain and say, oh, this is the problem. Obviously there's some cases where we can say, hey, there's these, this gray matter that's causing issues, but you touched on something interesting with, sometimes neurons don't function well on sugar, on carbohydrates, because the function is broke there. Yeah. However, everyone seems to do well with ketone bodies for energy, since it kind of goes into the whole idea that there's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. We're not anti-carbohydrate. It's totally fine. Most people tend to handle them okay. But there are people with some, neurodegenerative diseases, be it Alzheimer's. I've even read issues where people have had schizophrenia, and they've actually had some success in helping those people with their bouts by putting them on a ketogenic diet.
That's exactly right. I've seen people looking at car accident victims and doing that to help regrow their nerves. So it's not just related to Alzheimer's disease, although there's some really great stuff coming out about that. The deal is that, our brain uses glucose. That's the primary fuel for the neurons. But there has a side route. You can fuel the whole ATP generation with ketones. And so there's this, even when the glucose machinery is broken in the brain, the ketone still can supply ATP into those cells. And this just turns on people's lights. There's some of those books I'm reading where they're talking about single dose responses. They give somebody with Alzheimer's a big glob of coconut oil, and that same day, sometimes, not every time, but sometimes they'll have all these changes. All of a sudden their mental faculties are returning. There's some really neat stuff happening in that research. Yeah,
it is interesting, and it's not hyperbole. Like you said, there's actual research showing that is going on. And these fats are highly ketogenic. So when we talk about ketone bodies, they're just a byproduct of what gets broken down from the fat. It's an actual energy substrate that your body can use, correct?
Yeah. The big ones, I think there's 3 that get talked about. There's acetone, which sounds like the solvent.
Which gives you that fruity breath.
That fruity breath, acetone breath. There's beta-hydroxybutyrate, which is the big one, a BHB. That's the one that everyone's really trying to get more of in their blood. And then there's the acetoacetone. So
interesting.
Those are the 3, the ketone bodies. These things you're going to hear more about them because ketones are blowing up.
Yeah, and you don't have to be, there's a misnomer too that you have to eat no carbs to get into ketosis. And you really don't, actually. These fats are highly ketogenic that we touched on. So in the presence of some carbohydrates, obviously if you're really high, it's going to make it harder to accomplish that. But if your diet is relatively low in carbohydrates, it doesn't have to be completely eliminated. These can actually help your liver generate those.
That's a really good point. They used to do ketogenic diets by taking people off like virtually all carbs, and that is kind of hard on the adrenal glands for a lot of people. And this allows you to, as you were saying, you're breaking down these fatty acids, you're building ketones, and it's really a lot better way to get into ketosis.
Yeah, and it's difficult too to completely eliminate carbohydrates, especially with us. We deal with a couple different populations because we get a lot of questions. And we always say, well, who's it for? What are your goals? Things like that. Because there's not these blanketed answers, unfortunately. Because sometimes we're dealing with athletes who want to perform at a high level, and sometimes we're dealing with somebody who maybe just wants to get in shape, and sometimes we're dealing with somebody who's sedentary and really doesn't have an interest in exercising. Although we strongly influence that you do because we know of all the benefits from it, especially some high intensity exercise for that matter. But the population matters, so when we talk about these things, we have to address who can benefit and what, and some of these benefits are pretty universal.
Yeah, I honestly would say everybody could benefit in some way from coconut oil. I mean, it is a really stable fat to use in your diet. Whether you're cooking with it, whether you put it take it right off a spoon, you put it in your smoothie, there's really no wrong way to eat it, and it's super healthy for your cells. I mean, I've read research on thyroid. It really stabilizes the bloodstream and helps thyroid hormones get delivered. There's all kinds of research on antioxidant profiles. It helps clean the blood from viral load and other pathogens or infectious materials. So, I mean, it's just a great oil that humans have been cooking with for a long time, back before we really had heart disease as a big deal.
Yeah, when I first started looking into it a few years ago, I was, a knee-jerk skeptic. I was like, oh, come on, it's a fat from coconut. Really, it can have all these effects. That's just kind of my nature, is to be a little skeptical. First, then you start to look into it, it's like really interesting. So I actually include it in my smoothies every day. I pretty much get 2 tablespoons in my diet every day.
Awesome.
It'll also help raise body temperature. Because MCTs can be broken down, quickly. You can generate heat in the body. Heat in the body is a good thing. It helps defeat pathogenic bacteria. They don't like those higher temperatures.
Right.
It seems to be benign to probiotics, aka good bacteria in your body.
Not going to degrade your flora.
Yeah, good stuff. And then, as we talk about too with gut health, sometimes those fats, we've kind of gone away from the dogma of, oh, you got to have a ton of fiber to help treat people who have, be it IBS or anything like that, because that just sucks up water.
Yeah,
really,
I'm
just
so glad
harsh on you.
Getting away from that. I really, that's a long time coming.
Sure, I think people could think of it almost like a lubricant inside your GI tract, right?
Right. One thing also, people who have gallbladder problems, this actually gets metabolized a lot differently. It doesn't use bile. That's pretty unique among fats.
Yes,
it's
very
actually,
much so.
I mean, think about these MCTs we've talked about. Medium chain triglycerides, the only real other source in a human diet is breast milk. And what does that tell you? This is a really high energy fuel source that helps development at that critical window of life. It's really important.
Yeah, and nature kind of dictated that it's in breast milk for a reason, so when it comes to certain things with nature, it's kind of like, why argue to a point, or at least look into it and say, well, why is this? That makes sense. You touched on something too, it doesn't use bile, so just shunt it off to the liver, and that's where it's quickly metabolized.
It's almost metabolized like a carbohydrate.
Yeah.
It really is. It's such a different pathway. I mean, it really, there's so many areas of benefit. We didn't even touch on the skin. Like my girlfriend uses it as she has a bottle in the shower, and right after showering, she rubs it into her skin. It's incredible how much softer and supple the skin gets after that. People use it for burns.
Even from ingesting it too, you can find, because you will find like psoriasis, things are usually caused by some underlying infection. There's a lot of interesting work going on there. So if you can improve it. Now, we're not saying just taking 2 tablespoons of coconut oil and do it. You should obviously make other changes, but this can be a very large contributor to that.
Big time.
And for those of you guys trying to build muscle, well, a large component of muscle tissue is fat. A lot of people just think, oh, it's all protein. No, there's actually, by calorie, I think it's like 50-50 between fat and protein. It's pretty close. Don't quote me on that, but it is a significant portion of muscle tissue. And, a lot of people think that fat, stored body fat, is this great energy source. It's really not, actually. It's actually muscle, because if you think about it in the sense of being a good hunter-gatherer, so to speak, throughout the summer, and when the feast is going on, would it make sense to get fat and become a bad hunter?
Right.
It would make sense to put on more muscle, probably, to make you a better hunter.
I think the selection pressure has made it a little.
So muscle is actually a stored form of energy.
You got it.
That's a way to think of it.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, we don't have the famine of the winter to worry about anymore, but it's just interesting that I think sometimes people think, oh, well, body fat is the way we store it.
Right.
Not necessarily.
Intuitive thing that people have thought for a long time.
Sure, yeah. And if you look back at just basic evolutionary principles, is why would that make sense? How does that, you know what I mean? Because then, if that were the case, the fattest individual from the summer would probably survive the best.
They'd be the fittest to survive.
Good luck spearing a deer or something,
So I think the idea is that coconut oil is really good for Virtually anyone. I would also, we haven't talked about this, but it's really known for beating down infections in the body. I mean, there's actually published research. I was reading one at Georgetown University where they were testing it against herpes virus, and it was actually, I think, better, or at least comparable or better than acyclovir, which is the pharmaceutical. I mean, we're not saying it's going to cure you of herpes infections. You know, a lot of people have simplex virus stuff going on, but the fact is that they're researching it for AIDS and hepatitis and all these other bacterium. I mean, it is really turning out to be a very powerful therapy.
I think the way to think of it is not making your body a really good petri dish for all these bad bacteria, all these bad viruses or anything like that. Is if you can give your body the ability to create an environment that's good for your probiotics, for your good bacteria, and bad for the bad guys. Because the bad guys can't digest fat, basically. They can't metabolize it. So if you're feeding them sugar, well then that's a problem. We're not saying don't eat sugar. It's fine. It's the dose that makes the poison. So we don't want to become alarmists or something like that. That's not the point. The point is we can make the environment within our bodies much better, much more beneficial for building muscle, being healthy, good skin, all that kind of good stuff.
I use it every day.
Yeah, I do too. Like I said, it's in my smoothies. I'll cook with it sometimes. Some things I find that it doesn't taste as good when I cook with. Other things I find that it tastes really good.
I love eggs.
Jeff is the same way, our camera guy, actually. He's been telling me, you got to put it with your eggs. I'm like, well, I like butter with my eggs.
So good.
See, I prefer butter, but I guess I have to give it a shot. But I just like it in my smoothies. It actually helps. It makes it, kind of gives it like a tropical type flavor.
You're right. It doesn't lend itself to everything, but guys, try it out. It's awesome stuff.
Yeah, and one last thing too, it could actually help with cholesterol too. It can improve your HDL levels, can rise them, and your LDLs can actually become more buoyant. Because as we've talked about before, LDL in and of itself is not this terrible form of cholesterol. It's the small, dense ones. If you have the actual lipoprotein itself is protected by cholesterol and fat, then it's actually going to be much safer.
Yeah, the whole thing with LDL, the reason it's bad, it's just more prone to oxidation. And the only cholesterol that's ever bad in the human body is oxidized cholesterol. Cholesterol is one of the most important molecules in the body, unless it's oxidized, and then it's really harmful. So you've got to keep it stable, keep those long chain, those medium chains, and really stable fatty acids going into the blood, and they really help stabilize things.
So the bottom line is, adding some coconut oil to your diet is probably a really good idea. There are a few sources available of such a good source of fats, so to speak. There's not many other things out there that are its equal, so to speak. There are other fats you can use, but pretty much everyone can benefit from adding it to your diet. Even as little as a tablespoon a day could really, really help. Don't be afraid of the calories. Replace calories elsewhere with it. We can do other videos and stuff based on that.
Last thing I'll say, Garden of Life is one of the best on the market. There's other great ones. We're not going to say ours is the only game in town, obviously, but it's really it's a table grade. And, we pick the AAA grade. A lot of them are getting coconuts that are a little bit bruised or beaten, so ours are like the freshest. They're also packaged within 1 hour of the pressing, and they're not hydrogenated. It's a really nice way we produce this. We were one of the first companies on the industry to make
it's been a long time.
Coconut oil.
Cool. Well, I think we covered everything we could. Obviously, we could spend more time talking about this stuff because when you go into fats, it could become this whole great subject, but focusing on coconut oil. So if you guys have any questions, please post them in the comment section of the video or the blog. I'm more than happy to answer them. Thanks, Bruce, and thank you for watching.